Hello again everyone, welcome back to the channel, and to part 3 in my Conquest of Britain series. Now in the last part we learned all about Vespasian and the 2nd Legion Augusta heading west, and also about Publius Ostorius Scapula, the governor of Britannia, putting down the first Iceni revolt. But now it's time for part 3, with Ostorius facing westward towards the hills of Wales, where an old enemy of Rome was about to reappear. Caratacus. The Roman campaign into Wales started in the northeast against a tribe called the Deceangli near the Cheshire Gap. Now by attacking them, Ostorius was cutting a wedge between the tribes of northern Britain and the increasingly hostile Welsh ones, a prime example of divide and conquer. Tacitus doesn't give us a lot of detail about this campaign in northeastern Wales, but regardless, before Ostorius could really make any gains, he had to turn around and deal with unrest in Brigantian territory, the territory that was ruled by one Queen Cartimandua. Sadly, we don't know a lot about this particular Brigantian revolt, but we know that Ostorius had to respond personally, which I think shows the fragility of the client kingdom system under Rome. The north was restless, and Rome was going to have to keep a very close eye on it. After this, in the late 40s AD, Ostorius was ready to launch his main campaign into southeastern Wales, against a tribe called the Silures, one of the most stubborn in Britain, but leading them was Caratacus. Yes, that Caratacus, the same man who had faced the legions of Aulus Plautius in the first part of the Conquest. After the fall of Camulodunum, he fled to Wales, but he didn't become an exile. Instead, he became the head of a fierce tribal resistance. Guerrilla warfare was Caratacus' strategy: small raids, ambushes, surprise attacks. He knew he couldn't defeat the Romans in an open battle, but in the hills of Wales, he had the advantage. As the Romans pushed deeper into Silurian territory, resistance got stronger, and according to Tacitus, Ostorius made the terrible mistake of threatening the Silures with extermination. This threat, it backfired spectacularly. As you'd expect from a tribe that thought it had nothing to lose, the Silurians increased their attacks, capturing Roman soldiers and sending them to neighbouring tribes, causing the creation of a new anti-Roman alliance in the west. Ostorius responded to this by trying to corner Caratacus, pushing Caratacus ever further north, into the territory of the Ordovices, a tribe in northern Wales known for its mountain strongholds. And it was somewhere here in the early 50s AD that Caratacus decided to make a final stand. Tacitus paints for us a vivid scene: a steep ridge of hills above a river, the slopes barricaded by stones and heavily armed soldiers. So daunting was the prospect in front of him that Ostorius nearly turned tail, but the legion's morale was high. They wanted a battle. The Romans advanced, making their way across a difficult ford and then fighting their way uphill, under constant missile fire. Eventually though, they reached the barricade, and what followed was brutal hand-to-hand combat. The Roman infantry smashed their way through, and the Britons, lacking the discipline of the legions, faltered. As soon as the Romans had breached the barricades, the Britons fell into a rout. Caratacus' wife and daughter were captured, and Caratacus himself had to flee to the territory of the Brigantes. Caractacus sought refuge with Queen Cartimandua of the Brigantes, who was already a client ruler for Rome, and she was no ordinary client ruler either. She ruled over one of the largest and most strategically important pieces of land in Britain, and the deal she had made with Rome wasn't about submission, it was about strategy. The arrival of Caractacus caused Queen Cartimandua to be caught between a rock and a hard place, but in the end she decided to hand Caractacus over to the Romans, which shocked a lot of Britons. But it did mean that Caractacus was not in a position to radicalise the Brigantes against the Romans, which meant that Cartimandua was able to hold on to her territory. She was able to hold on to the territory of the Brigantes through diplomacy rather than war. This handover was a massive propaganda victory for the Romans. Caractacus, the most famous fugitive in Britain, was on his way to Rome. In Rome, Caractacus was paraded through the streets much like any captive king, much like Vercingetorix after the Gallic Wars, a trophy of empire. But then, something rather strange happened. Tacitus tells us that Caractacus was allowed to speak to the emperor and to the senate, and when he did so, he delivered a speech that was so dignified, so moving, so measured, that Emperor Claudius was moved to spare his life, and Caractacus and his family were allowed to live their days in peace, a moment of rare Roman clemency. According to Cassius Dio, upon looking at Rome's splendour, Caractacus is supposed to have said, "And can you then, who possess such magnificence, envy our poor huts?" He may have lost his freedom, but he had gained Rome's respect. Back in Britain, however, things were not looking good for the Romans, and the Silures were still a problem. They were killing many Roman legionaries and taking many as hostages. And Tacitus puts a lot of this blame on Ostorius' earlier threats to exterminate the Silures, which had managed to unify so many tribes against the Romans. And in 52 AD, absolutely exhausted, Publius Ostorius Scapula died. Worn out with care, as Tacitus puts it. And there you have it. Caractacus may have fallen, but his cause lived on, and next time we will be looking at the Druids of Anglesey. But thank you very much for watching. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe, it really helps immensely, and I'll see you on the next one. Ciao for now.